There's a certain psychology that I notice with people like me. I'll give you an example. My wife has a perception that I'm lucky. Okay, let me give you a very specific example. I always find a space in a car park, right? She doesn't always find a space in the car park, but we're going to the same car park, and for years she didn't realise what I did, right? Now what I did, I go into a car park, I go the wrong way, right? I go right instead of going left, because if everyone's going left, at some point further on, someone's stopping to reverse into a space. If you go right, you need to be able to see right, okay? Otherwise you can have a head-on accident, right? But if you look right, there'll always be spaces. So you just nip in and go into the spaces. And if you don't describe what you're doing to people, they think you're lucky. Now, there's a nice metaphor for being an entrepreneur. You're trying to tilt the tables. You're trying to create luck. You're trying to do things a little bit differently. You also, the psychology is always one of, there will be bad times. There will be negatives. There will be disasters. You just got to get up and you've got to keep going. And that is born. Some people are born with the ability to do that. So it's a sort of a surfeit of confidence. And if you're unwilling to accept being crushed, you will get up and you will keep going. And in most cases, if you're running a business, if you get through the first year or 18 months, you're likely to be successful. It's all about just getting up and keeping going. So I think there's elements of born, there's elements of privilege sometimes. I'm a big guy in a European country. I've had a decent education. I've got a PhD. That tilts things in your favour to a certain extent. But I've also known people entirely not like me who've been more successful. So I don't think it's quite that. I don't think it's privilege. I think it's psychology. The investment community is looking for return. Okay, you have to have the prospects of delivering that return. It's no use raising money for ego purposes. Your life becomes not your own when you raise money. You have other paymasters, literally. It helps if you've been through this process before. Now, I've done this many times over the years, and I approach my engagements with venture capitalists in a reasonably cynical fashion. Like, for instance, if someone sits in front of me and says, I only invest in unicorns, I normally leave the room, right? There's a reason a unicorn is a mythological creature, right? So it's irrational to suggest that you can spot a company when it's got a few $100,000 revenue. It's going to end up with $1 billion valuation. That's daft, right? However, if you have a business that has traction, it has growth possibilities, if it's done its homework and understands its competitive landscape and what have you, then you can attract the right VCs. And that's the key. You have to have a decent proposition, and you need to talk to a lot of people. And then it comes down to the human side. These people own you, in effect. You have to like them. You have to respect them. So I've been through my most recent fundraiser was only about 18 months or so ago, a so-called Series A raise. And we saw 15 different VCs. We got term sheets from about half of them. And the two that we selected weren't the ones that valued the business the highest. They weren't even in the top 3 in terms of valuation. Now that is a really difficult dance to do, because your existing shareholders kind of like the idea of you getting the highest valuation you can. But if you're, I sometimes use the metaphor of being on a galley, a slave galley, where I've got the oar. So if you're in somebody else's trireme and you're rowing away, you kind of got to respect them and like them and know that if there's choppy water, they're not going to drown you, right? So you have to choose the right people, decent people. And we had the huge advantage of having a couple of investors, both of whom I knew fractionally before we did the exercise, and one I've known for a few years, who I completely respect. They are more capable than I am in their business CV, and I respect that. They've been on my side of the desk, and that's hugely energising and hugely attractive. Just raising money for money's sake, you'll catch a cold. I think the culture, for what it's worth, in our business is one of, and most companies will say this, so it will sound a little bit trite, but it's about honesty and integrity. It's about, values of treating people the way you'd expect to be treated yourself. Those universal values are what brings success to a lot of businesses, particularly small businesses. You have to differentiate yourself by being decent. Giles was a founder, so he and I, and is the CTO, we share those common values. I think collectively between us we have 12 children. So that's too many, isn't it? So we have this sort of this basic sort of morality to business that we like to that we have with our families, but we also try to apply in the workplace. That feels trite, but it's true. Having those values is what attracts people to working with you. It's relatively easy to lift that up and place it into another country. You probably need to ask me the question in a couple of years' time whether we've been able to maintain that cultural similarity between two different territories. That's a work in progress. Although interestingly, we're based in a building called the Clergy House, which is was built in 1860 something, sort of a Victorian church building. And in Virginia, where we're based in the Carriage House, which in American context is the oldest building in the world. So it must be 90, even 100 years old. But even the similarity of the name of the buildings we're in reflects something of what we are as a company.